part of the reason why I felt confident is because we started seeing numbers. We would see every time we wrote an article, our conversions would go up from month to month, to the point where even now today, 20 to 25% of our monthly conversions come from organic search that is just out there and working for us.
Welcome to ProfitLed Season 2, Our Journey to a Million, Episode 13. I'm Melissa Kwan, co-founder and CEO of eWebinar and your host, and I'm here with my co-host, Todd Parmley, eWebinar COO. Hey, Todd, how's it going in New York?
It is hot AF, as the kids say. So we're in the middle of this heat wave. Spring in New York is like, I love New York in June. You know that song? It's more like 2 weeks in June, and then it's over.
Well, I'm living the opposite actually right now in Lisbon. The weather in Europe has just been completely off. So it's been like raining all the time everywhere. Apparently in Paris it's like that, and Amsterdam was like that before we came. And then Lisbon is supposed to be sunny all the time, coming close to summer. But the day we landed, the weather turned. And it started raining. So we're like, what is going on with us? It's actually much cooler than it's supposed to be, but at least we're in Lisbon, so that part's nice.
Thankfully, climate change is a hoax, so we'll be fine.
Yeah, I'm not feeling any global warming. It's always cold where I am. So in the last episode, we talked about staying super lean as a bootstrap startup and the people, product, and operational decisions that we made at eWebinar to stay lean ourselves. So that was a pretty meaty episode, I thought. Today, we're going to talk about owning your SEO strategy when marketing agencies suck. I know that this episode is going to be kind of more polarizing because a lot of times when I say that, people are either like, yeah, they do suck, or like, no, they don't. But this episode is going to be mostly you because you're the one that owns that strategy and executes on our SEO content and digital marketing amongst, all the many other product things that you do.
The man of many hats. It's so funny. I know a few things now. And this is almost like my disclaimer. I know a few things now, but I still feel like an SEO dum-dum. Like there's certain things that I actually feel pretty confident about what I know, but it is such a vast topic. I mean, we can talk about this a little bit later too, but like I knew nothing about SEO. Like it had always been on the periphery for me. I touched it slightly when being asked to like write work items to optimize a website technically for SEO. How do you appear number one in search results for things that will actually turn into revenue? I think that was like a foreign concept for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should back up a bit, right? And just kind of rewind, I guess, and jog our memory of like how we even ended up needing to own our SEO. And I've, talked about my own backstory with marketing agencies quite a bit, publicly and also, a lot privately. But, I think in my entire career of like startups in the last 14 years, I've probably worked with 20 marketing agencies, contractors over the last decade. And they always end up falling short. They always end up blaming us, not just eWebinar, but also like I'm talking about my past as well. A few months later, not spending enough time or money, not giving them enough time kind of to prove themselves. A lot of times, like these agencies they don't even really get why we exist as a company. They just create content kind of for the sake of creating content. In my own experience, I don't know, I've never run a marketing agency before, like maybe working with multiple companies and context switching is just really hard. I just had no idea what marketing agencies actually needed to do. So our team has no marketing background. And in the beginning, it was just such a pain. And of course, it's a pain now. But in the beginning, I was desperately looking for someone to just take that pain away. Like I just wanted to pay someone to do marketing. It wasn't until 9 or 12 months into eWebinar when multiple agencies again didn't work out that I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to take this December off and just take like HubSpot Academy marketing courses and learn what marketing is because I need to know why it's so hard. And I want to like kind of define like what not working out means. I think everybody kind of starts at a high note. This is your proposal. This is what we're going to do for you. I personally also didn't know anything about SEO, writing blogs, the difference between content, keyword research. So it all kind of sounded good. And then in the end, like a few months later, sometimes 6 months later, we're not just not getting the traffic, the content, the actual content that we would get is also not good. when I say marketing agency, I'm not just talking about like writing content and SEO, right? It's also the number of companies and contractors we've also engaged for like ads. And it was only after taking a bunch of courses on HubSpot Academy that I finally realized that marketing is not a single function. Like I finally realized that like people who write for SEO is not people who write for case studies or newsletters. The people who buy the ads aren't the people who write the ads. And then the people who write the ads, they also don't write other types of content. So it was only then that I realized that marketing was like multiple different functions. And all these years, I was trying to hire one company, one person to do marketing so I could focus on, demand gen and sales and outreach and all those things. That's been my overall experience, but also my experience, with the first year, coming into eWebinar as well. I'm curious to hear, I guess, a bit about your background and your history with, just marketing before you became a marketer yourself.
I mean, none. I'd worked with marketers, so I understood peripherally kind of some of the ways that they thought. And I'd also worked with agencies on products. I'm talking about like dev and design agencies. So I'm not necessarily referring to the marketing agency, but the agency model is just very, very hard because you need to bring somebody in, make them an expert, and they never care as much. The agency model is hard to begin with, but I'd just been an observer. I would observe marketing in their activities, but had no direct experience whatsoever.
I mean, I think the other problem that we were experiencing, which was pretty common in my last companies as well, was like the person who would pitch the proposal and the person I would be talking to like close my deal was not the person or the people that were actually executing on the strategy. So I'm talking to like the expert, right? The owner of the company, whereas the person writing for us and the person we end up liaising with is like some downline or like some junior writer. And they have so little business experience that they didn't even get what we were doing. It was so hard for them to grasp the concept of our businesses. So how can they write for it?
I mean, I think we should probably talk a little bit about what made you believe that we needed to own our SEO strategy. Like what got us there? Because you sort of been talking about marketing agents more generally, but what was it about SEO and eWebinar that was not working?
I mean, we were just not doing any of it. I mean, I was doing founder-led sales, which, we talked extensively about on episode 10. Sales is my background, but, exhausting that network was exhausting and a bit soul-crushing because then you realize I've come to the end of the road for finding leads for my company. And if I don't have more leads, I don't make more sales, I'm not going to be able to pay for these people. And we weren't profitable. We were like far from profitable at the time. We're still talking like first year when we started to own this strategy. So I think it was finally realizing that you can't just do marketing. It's not a thing. And then also realizing that agencies can't go from 0 to 1. Like accepting that we were in the 0 stage and there was so much experimenting that needed to happen. We didn't know what we wanted to be, what we could be when we grew up. We were throwing everything against the wall, trying to make it stick. We didn't know who we were serving. We didn't really have a clear roadmap. We were just doing everything we could to get revenue and testing a lot of things. And then realizing we can't hire people and pay them a lot to test all this stuff with us, right? I think a lot of agencies are really good from going from 1 to 2 when there is already a framework to work from, when you have customers that you can extract language from and, something to copy. But when you're trying to figure out who you are, they can't figure out who you are for you. Marketing amplifies who you are. So I didn't really understand that. So I finally kind of came to that kind of come to Jesus moment. I realized like our product, because it's a self-serve product at a low price point, we are not a sales-led product. We have to be a marketing-led, customer-led product. And we have to have an inbound strategy. And if that's how we make money, then we can't put our fate, into someone else's hands. And I think that was like when I came to you, because we already at that point had a few different trial and errors with at least 3 different companies where I was like, now I'm going to the same vicious cycle. Every time we try someone or a company, it's 3 to 5 months, right? Minimum. We're paying them a retainer. And then a few months in, no one's happy because no one's seeing success. And then we're a few months in that we're not getting return for the money that we spent. And we did that already kind of a few times. And I remember like just realizing and accepting that I didn't know what I was doing, that someone else I was hiring also didn't know what they were doing. And in hindsight, I think they should have said no to us, but I wonder if marketing companies even know this. Yeah, I wonder if they think they really can deliver and they underestimate the 0 to 1 startup.
I don't even think they think of the 0 to 1 concept. I think they just sort of assume that whatever strategies they do with an existing company, that where you're amplifying a clear, defined message to a clear, defined customer, it's not the same. And I don't think they even think about that. I don't know if you remember the timeline because it's all a blur. I went away to work full time somewhere else while you guys were starting to build some momentum, get some revenue. And I came back when you were what turned out to be on the last SEO agency that we would try. And when I came in, I hit the ground running. I had no idea what the strategy was. I didn't know anything. I just sort of started executing. So I started writing, and we cranked out a ton of content, but it was not until that company failed, honestly, that we realized like this is not working.
But I remember calling you and just sharing exactly what I said to you just now, to you back then. And there was no real discussion. There was no resistance. It was like, yeah, I think we need to do this. Because you weren't full-time yet. You were part-time working with those agencies that I hired to review the content. Right. I mean, I think we should give our audience here a little bit of background about your content background. Like, I do think that, of course, it's important to own. I think we got super lucky that you're so good with content and words and just formulating thoughts, but not every startup is that lucky, right? So I think we need to give people a bit of background about like where you came from.
Well, so, my background is in the theater, and I was an actor. Like, I have my MFA in acting, and I came to New York to be an actor and hated it immediately. I found it absolutely demoralizing to audition. And so I started working as a director, and I started working with new writers. That became kind of my thing. And so I became what's called a dramaturg, which is basically someone who helps a playwright or helps a director, but in this case, helped a playwright develop their work. One of the things you don't realize when you work in that business is that you learn about how to tell a story. You learn how to get somebody's attention. So there's all these skills that I didn't even know would transfer that came with that. And it is about an understanding of language, but at the same time, I'd never really been a writer myself. I'd written some, but I was really good at helping other writers realize what they were trying to get out. So I think all of that did help. Primarily the thing about like in a play or in a film, whatever, you want the audience to be at point A at the beginning, and then you want them to be at point C or D or F or whatever at the end. And you need to take them through the various points to get them there. And that's still how I think about writing, especially in the context of SEO. It's like people come in with certain assumptions about what your product is or isn't, about what they need or what they don't need. And so you make assumptions about where they are when they encounter you. And then you write something where at the end they're like, holy shit, I need to sign up for a webinar, right? Because it solves my problem.
I mean, when I came to you though, were you already thinking like we need to own our own SEO? Like, because you were working with these companies like pretty actively. And I knew that you were frustrated that some of those points weren't getting across. Maybe describe that a little bit, because what I want our audience to get here is like, how do you know you're not on the right track, right? How do you know when you're working with an agency that like maybe you need to switch or maybe you need to just take it over?
First of all, the content that the writers were producing was very poor. And maybe it was optimized for SEO purposes, but there was no way somebody encountered this content that they would be swayed to do anything. Maybe they would encounter it because we had optimized it to appear in search, but it wasn't going to do anything. And also, just to be frank, the quality of the writing was mediocre at best. And so I was spending all of this time just editing and fixing the content, and also trying really hard not to be a perfectionist, because I can kind of go that way. But it was not that. I was not being a perfectionist. It was not good. But the real moment that was like, oh no. I mean, we had this conversation before that, right? But I don't know if you remember, we sort of pushed this agency and we met with their owner and kind of forced them to say, how can you show us that what you're doing is working? And they would point at like traffic numbers or position numbers, but we're like, how is it translating to revenue? How is it translating to conversions? And it was like we were speaking some alien language. I remember he didn't even know that that could be a question. And like for us as such a small startup with so limited resources, we couldn't afford for a marketing strategy to just bring visitors to our website. We needed to have that time actually convert into revenue. So we needed to know that not only what we were writing was getting people to our website, but that they would then sign up.
I remember that moment when, I don't really micromanage any of this, but I do want to read the content before it gets published. And I remember it was just piece after piece after piece. I'm like, what is this garbage? I couldn't even finish reading my own blog. And I think for me, that was one of those moments too, where I'm like, I am embarrassed to put this on our website.
This is all pre-AI, right? Even the AI content in some ways is better than what we were seeing. So I can't imagine how these companies are going to compete in this new world. But this was all before any of that had emerged.
I mean, to try to make it easier on the writers, and I think we really did give everybody we work with a chance, right? We are always trying to get to know them, to show them our case studies, to describe to them how this works, get them to look at our product, explain to them. I think we gave them a lot of time. And we even then the last step was here is an outline with all the details you need. Convert this into a great piece of writing. It was just terrible. It was all the points were there, but it wasn't written in a coherent way. It was not written for the advanced business user that we want to attract and also just earn respect from. And I remember I was following this blog already at the time, growandconvert.com. And it was one of the courses that I took on top of, the HubSpot Academy stuff. And, Grow and Convert was and is run by these two guys, Davish and Benji, that I just really respect. I didn't know them, but I love all their blog. I set a time aside to read it. In fact, some of their stuff is written in such a high level manner that I have to read it multiple times to fully absorb it. But my brain doesn't really work that way. So while I kind of had the foundation from taking their course and reading their content and going to their forums, I couldn't, there was no way I could actually put that into execution, but I knew something better was out there. And I remember reading something that said, if you want to attract a high level business user, you have to write on their level. And that made so much sense to me. So when we decided, okay, you know what, let's just start clean slate and let's try to own this thing ourselves. And then we're okay, well, now what? Back to step one. We've just never done it before. I mean, for me, it was daunting, but also so freeing that I was no longer prisoner to these agencies and people that we just couldn't find a way to work with.
Yeah. I mean, I think just to reiterate two things that you said, one of them is we're sort of poo-pooing marketing agencies, right? So it may sound like we really didn't give them a chance. I think it's important to emphasize that we really went in full faith to try to make this work. Of course we're going to do that, right? We're not spending money to have something fail. But the thing that struck me the most about Grow and Convert's blog is how remarkably transparent they are about how what they're doing work, how it's succeeding. They will show you the numbers, anonymize it, right? Because they're from their clients. So we don't know who exactly these people are, but they will say, we did this and got these results. So it was really hard to look at that because up till then, no marketing agency, when pressed, would get really dodgy and weird about how you measure success, especially from a conversion point of view, which I would have assumed was the norm. You measure success by how much revenue you're bringing in from the content you write. But that, to my surprise, was a foreign concept. And I know one of the reasons we were drawn to Grow and Convert is because that's what they were kind of preaching, is that you can actually write content and then you can measure the results of how many conversions are actually coming from it. And it's not exact, but it's something.
Yeah, I mean, I think dodging attribution is not just a marketing agency thing. It's an every marketer thing, right? It's it's a billboard on a highway, right? That's the most common kind of parallel that gets drawn. But as a company that has such limited dollars to spend, I don't think that was the major issue for us, though, attribution. It was just really poor writing. It wasn't until later that we also realized and learned that, great writers are actually really, really hard to find.
I mean, maybe we should just kind of jump into we realized we needed to own it. So then what did we do? And because of your high opinion of Grow and Convert, we reached out to them. And I guess I took their course too, which is an online, do it your own pace course. And I think we'd floated the idea to them that maybe they'd always done a do it for you model. And it was basically you do it, but we'll guide you. And they agreed to take us on as an experiment to see if that model would work for them. And I think the thing that's so funny is I think they really immediately realized that it wasn't a good model for them. But I think they liked us and they were generous. I think we're their only like client ever that did it this way.
I mean, I think we just got super lucky. I remember just saying, hey, I've been following you guys for a long time, took your course. We can't afford you, but is there a way where you could teach us? Like, do you do consulting gigs? And then you could teach Todd what to do. At the time, they were playing with the idea of this, like, done with you, as you said, like a complete experiment. And actually, I think they got also super lucky with us because you are such a nerd and that kind of stuff.
Yes, it's true.
And you actually do the work. And I think it was seeing how you actually do the work that they realize, oh, actually, in order for this to work, our client has to do the work. And a lot of clients may not do the work. And then we would get blamed for it. And then they realize that just wasn't really worth it for them.
Just to tell you how it rolled out, I took their course and I think we did like maybe an onboarding call, something like that. But I went into research mode for like a month because basically so much of what they advocate for and how you write is talking about how you differentiate yourself in the marketplace. And I knew from what you'd said, and I kind of knew the players out there, but I wanted to know for myself 100% where exactly we fit in the market and why we were better. I signed up for every product. I did screen recordings of every workflow, took notes on everything, and compiled this massive competitive research doc. So I confidently knew where our strengths were and in some cases, some of our weaknesses, where it's like, frankly, in those cases, we weren't even trying to compete. But that period of research was also super, super important.
I think I've told you this before, but one of my friends, he's really funny, and he calls me a freak in the spreadsheets. And I truly think that with you, I have met my match. You are the true
freak in the spreadsheet.
Yeah, freak in the spreadsheets. Sometimes I look at your spreadsheets, I'm like, I gotta go to sleep. Like my mind cannot comprehend how big of a spreadsheet this is.
It's a sickness. I did that. And I think actually, let me back up for a second, because I think one of the biggest leaps we had to make, because I think it goes against conventional kind of thinking. So I did a bunch of research to understand where we fit in the marketplace. But then, okay, what keywords are we going to target, right? So I knew nothing about keyword research. In doing keyword research, you see how much search volume a particular keyword, we were focusing only on the US, right, gets in a month. We would look at these terms that were very bottom of the funnel for us, like best automated webinar software, even just automated webinar software, and they were getting 150 search volume in the US in a month. It's important to note that our world, our search volume world is actually pretty small, but webinar gets like 29K a month. And so everything we were potentially targeting was somewhere between like 50 a month and that 29,000 cap. It felt like completely wrong to be writing a 5,000 word post for something that only got 150 search volume, right? To research and write this post, we really had to act on faith and say, and Grow and Convert was like, just trust us. In fact, they showed us numbers. They would be like, look at this client. Here's their mid funnel. Here's their top funnel content. Look at how many conversions they're getting, 0. Look at their bottom of funnel. They're getting conversions. And so we had to take that leap of faith.
But they taught you how to do the keyword research. Like you didn't have context. So that was part of the consulting done with you. So can you kind of go through what were the different building blocks you had to learn, like the whole process before you could actually put it into action?
Keyword research itself is quite straightforward. And we knew that the first kind of 3 to 9 months of content would be focused only on bottom of the funnel content. And so they basically told us to write a few different types of articles: best of articles, best software, best pre-recorded webinar, best on-demand webinar, some ultimate guides, and some how-tos, like how to create a pre-recorded webinar. So the breadth of what we were writing was actually quite narrow. We were really focused on only these very bottom of the funnel keywords. So in some ways, I didn't really learn too much about keyword research until we'd exhausted those. And then I was like, what now? So I had to kind of go deeper into keyword research later. But at the beginning, I think the two main things I had to learn were there's no like wishful thinking in SEO. You must satisfy Google's search algorithm. You have to understand search intent. You have to use tools like ClearScope or Surfer SEO to make sure that the way you're structuring your article and the keywords that you're including are actually what Google needs to see in order to get you there. So there's that part of it, which in some ways is also the easy part. But then the bigger thing was how to write business persuasive content that gets someone who is looking for a particular thing. How do you hook their attention, and how do you get them to where they're like, I need to try out this software?
Like convince them, like sell them through the piece of content. And the thing is, like, what I loved about reading their blog was how strategic they were, right? How much they understood business. All of their templates was kind of structured. And actually, now that you say this, I remember when I had the first call with them to see if they would do a consulting arrangement with us. One of the things I brought up was I really like the way you structure your listicles, or, comparing this to this. Like, it was just stuff that I have never learned before, never even read anywhere before. And they have a lot of counterintuitive advice, which they share publicly, right? Whereas like every marketing agency is like, write for volume. And they really focus on search intent and do the opposite, like get kind of the low-hanging fruit, like go where no one else is going. Don't worry about volume, like you're going to compete in a space that you don't fully understand. Most companies would just be like, write for a webinar, there's 29,000, but for them, they're like focus on the 100, 50, the 200, and that's okay, right? Like kind of exhaust those first. So I remember asking them to specifically teach us their thought process in how they structured particularly long form content to convince someone and sell to them. And the other thing that they brought up to me was a lot of people don't want to talk about themselves. They're like, people don't like to be sold to. And they're like, of course I'm going to talk about myself, right? I'm writing this article. I'm getting you to my page and I'm getting your attention. I'm going to talk about myself. But all the things that I'm going to say are going to be backed by facts. And then you could fact check those things.
This is a concept that comes from Grow and Convert. I take no credit for this. They talk about fluff content, which is content that, it's fluff. It means nothing. And it also, to your point earlier, doesn't speak to a business audience. It's like if I'm going to a best automated webinar software article, if it starts with, an automated webinar is I'm like, I know that. Like, don't tell me what an automated webinar, and don't tell me I don't even want to know its benefits. I'm researching software right now. I know these things. That's why I'm here. So it's like, are you speaking to the level of audience that you should be speaking to? And are you making arguments that are grounded in fact and reality? You're not actually selling to someone in that sense. You're just saying, here is objectively why we're better, and you make your own choice. We don't shit talk our competitors, right? But we will say, we do this and they do not, right? In the completely objective way.
The other thing that I found fascinating, which I hadn't read before elsewhere, was they teach you to write in a way that sets the standard for what your type of software should be, right? So for example, right, like we talk about automated webinars, and the one thing that makes it amazing is having a chat feature. And we build it up, not by saying, hey, we have this chat feature, but we talk about how having that would enhance the software and how it would build a business case for the user. And then we go into, oh, by the way, we have that. And other people don't.
From a very high level, some of the things that shocked me about what they were suggesting we write, 10 best automated webinar software platforms, right? We're going to write an article on that. You're going to write a section on eWebinar that is like 3/4 the length of the article. And the last quarter, you're going to talk about the 9 other products. And I was like, really? They're like, yeah, you're talking about your product and why you matter. And I thought there's no way that's going to work. And it absolutely worked.
I mean, a lot of listicles are just like, here are the 10 pieces of software and ours is number 1, but it doesn't explain anything.
Yeah, exactly. To your point, it's like you are outlining what that category should be, what that kind of software should be. What is the definition of the best? And then you're like, oh yeah, we happen to be that. It's not a lie. You're not making it up. So again, it's based on fact. And then the other thing that sort of surprised me is putting in multiple CTAs throughout the article to do something, which in our case was to join a demo. We realized that people would never jump right to sign up. They needed to see the product first. We were adding regular calls to action throughout the article, which nobody had talked to us about before. But of course, that's the whole point. It took me probably 6 weeks to do all the competitive research and write our very first article, which was 12 best automated webinar software platforms. And it was like 5,000 words. And I was like, are you kidding me? No one's ever going to read this thing. We also focused on structuring it so it was completely skimmable. So if someone was just reading the headers as they went through, they would get the gist. And if something caught their eye, they would stop. And then we launched it onto the world. And one of the things I've learned from our point of view, I'm sure it's different for other businesses, is that you find out much quicker than you'd think how well something's going to do. You know within like a week or two if it has a chance of ranking well.
How do you know that?
You see it pop into position. If you're entering the results in the top 10, that is amazing.
Like you're searching, you mean, like on Google?
You're searching, yeah. Like I would wait like a week, and then I would go use Ahrefs, or at the time I think we were using SEMrush to see, and then also just search myself because I'm in the US, right? So I search automated webinar software, and you would know if you had a chance to rank, but it would take about 3 months for it to kind of settle where it was going to sort of live more permanently, and then you had to like fight to keep it in a top position. But we knew pretty quickly that, wow, this is working. And not only that, we were using Google Analytics to measure conversion attribution using the model comparison tool. One of the unconventional ideas that Grow and Convert has is to measure conversions by first touch and not last touch, which every SEO tool, in fact, now GA4, doesn't even support a first touch attribution model in their model comparison tool anymore, because everybody in the SEO world thinks about last touch conversion because they're really, in my mind at least, thinking about large companies which have a presence and people know who they are. So they just want to see that, what was the last thing that got them over the edge to come to our website, right? We're so small. I want to know every people. It's like we have this tiny store, and I want to know every person who walks through that door. I want to know who they are and how they found us. And so we were doing first touch attribution using the model comparison tool. And even though it's not foolproof, we could see the number of conversions that were being attributed to someone who had searched for something online, found our website by landing on that blog article, and then signed up for a trial. It was like amazing to have that experience when everybody else that we'd worked with in the past or even spoken to no one was ever talking about conversion or conversion attribution. They were only ever talking about traffic and like eyeballs, basically.
So it took you 6 weeks to kind of like wrap your head around, the knowledge that you had, you were getting from Grow and Convert, your own research, reading other articles that they've read and also in the industry. When did you feel fully comfortable to write your own article? And how hard was it, right? Like, I want to give people kind of an indication of like kind of the learning curve. And how did that experience for you, being a brand new marketer, kind of evolve over the next few months?
Yeah, so 6 weeks to ingest their course, do the competitive research, and write the first 5,000 word post. I had someone dedicated, guy named Daniel, who would basically advise me, give me feedback, and then I would write. Then we moved on to other articles. And, I would say it probably took another 2 to 3 months before I was like, I kind of feel like I know how to do this. But that first 4 to 6 weeks was all I was working on. I was working on nothing else. I was completely immersed in it. Then I started working on the other responsibilities that I have and focusing less time on it. But it was probably another 2 to 3 months before I felt competent and confident writing these articles. But part of the reason why I felt confident is because we started seeing numbers. We would see every time we wrote an article, our conversions would go up from month to month, to the point where even now today, 20 to 25% of our monthly conversions come from organic search that is just out there and working for us. We have to refresh it. We have to keep an eyeball on it, make sure that we're not losing position. The difference in conversions from position 1 to position 4, especially with a search volume of like 150, is massive. We have to tend to it and keep it up there. But for the most part, it's kind of out there working for you. You don't have to do anything.
But what were were there any major challenges or surprises as you were kind of going through this process?
Well, writing is really hard.
I can barely write a LinkedIn post. It takes me hours to kind of get it together.
It is so hard because you're trying to satisfy so many things. You're trying to satisfy Google's search algorithm, but you're also trying to write a compelling piece of content that is succinct and to the point, but that, has meat to it. Like it's not fluff content. It demonstrates, people can tell when they're reading it. They're like, oh, First of all, this person's talking to me like an adult professional, which is so funny how almost no SEO content is written for adult professionals. But that, oh, this guy actually knows what he's talking about because he's giving concrete examples. He's making clear, cogent arguments. Like that was the hardest thing to learn, is to actually write. And then what we learned later is when it got to the point where it was like, I have to start working on other things. And so we started looking to hire writers. We realized that that is very hard.
I mean, I think that's every company's challenge. Writing in itself is not hard, right? Writing great content is hard. And writing a long form piece of content is not the same as like SEO optimized piece of content. Can you maybe explain what that means, like to write an SEO optimized piece of content so that it has a high chance of ranking? What are some of those considerations that you have to have that just doesn't exist in regular content?
First of all, you can't reverse engineer SEO optimized content. You can't say, oh, I wrote this piece of great content. Now I'm going to try to figure out how to get it to rank for something. You have to start from the beginning and say, this is the keyword I'm going to target. And everything you do about how you outline and structure that article starts from there. And then you use tools. You use ClearScope, Surfer SEO, because ultimately what you're doing is when people talk about search intent, it also sounds like a big mystery. Like, how do I understand search intent? Well, Google automated webinar software, and you will see that every single result in the top 10 is some article or piece of content talking about the best automated webinar software and what your choice is. So it is 100% clear that people who are searching for that term are actively searching for software to buy or try. You must satisfy that search intent. And so sometimes you'll go and it's mixed, right? And that's harder. Like you can tell that like from the different things in the top 10 that it's not a super clear search intent, but you can't write something that doesn't meet that intent. And then you use tools to help you figure out what keywords you need to include and what you need to think of in your headers and maybe what your outline should be. You look at your other people that are ranking higher than you and you see what they have that you oftentimes have to like literally copy to make sure you have certain points in that they do. But then you're like, well, what are we offering that's different? So for example, an article we wrote, which was not super conversion focused, it was like, how do you create a Zoom on-demand webinar? The top search results are Zoom. They're help articles, like, right? But the truth is, their help is horrible. It's so hard to understand. There's no screenshots. It's not clear what all of the settings mean. So we created an article that had all of those things in it, made it absolutely dummy proof to figure out how to do it in Zoom. We're never going to beat Zoom in the search results, but we were right underneath them. So that's really the key, is satisfying search intent and using tools like ClearScope. You basically start putting in all the keywords till it says A+. Like literally they give you a grade.
And keywords, it just means you're including those keywords in that article. Does it matter where, or you just use them?
Sometimes, like for example, and again, this is where some things are more important to put in headers. Right. And the tools will tell you this. You should have this one in the header. It's rules like you don't want links in the first few paragraphs, because you don't want to basically be signaling to Google that you're going to immediately send somebody somewhere else. And a lot of this is conjecture, by the way. Nobody knows what's inside Google's black box, but there's really smart people that are trying really hard to figure out why things work the way they do. And they build products that help you understand what you can do to match what Google's looking for. So there's that, but that has nothing to do with a well-crafted business persuasive argument that gets people to sign up for your product. So the challenge is you have to do both.
And what advice do you have for our listeners that are like, I need to own this? Like, I'm listening to this, realizing I need to start kind of on my own journey. What would you say to them?
Specifically for a small bootstrap startup, I think it's critical that you own this. I would never have known even what to look for in a writer until I'd done it myself for a while. I guess the thing I would say is you can do it. I would still highly recommend, I think Grow and Convert still has their course. You could probably learn most of what they teach in their course anyway on their blog. I don't know if they'd like me saying that, but their course is amazing.
I think they welcome it. That's why they put the content out there. They're super transparent about their own strategy.
And super generous. And so it's like, I think that measure success by conversions and focus on bottom of the funnel until you're really getting diminishing returns. Because there was a certain point where we started to have to figure out how to move up funnel knowing that we would get less conversions per article. At least in our niche, there was only so much you could do. But yeah, my piece of advice is you can do this. You just have to dedicate time and effort to get going.
And what about for our listeners that don't know how to write? I mean, it's still really important to get that foundational knowledge. We say this so much on this podcast too, is like, you cannot hire someone to take away a pain that you don't understand. You won't know how to hire, how to interview, or how to evaluate success for them, how to set them up for success, and how to guide them. And I think ultimately, if you don't know how to do that task, they won't respect you. It doesn't mean you have to do it yourself, right? Being a good writer is something that's extremely hard to do. So what kind of advice do you have for someone who can't write for themselves?
While you might not be the writer, you're going to be the subject matter expert. So you should know. And if you don't, go look at your competitors and figure out, like, why are you the best thing in the marketplace and who the best customer you're for. You've got to figure that out because you're the subject matter expert. So you're going to have to download that to whoever you have writing for you. Yes, good writing is important, but I think if you understand the arguments that are to be made, that are, again, not fluff content, not based on, you just got to trust me, we're awesome, but like actually make a point as to why you're better. If you understand those things, you can measure whether or not someone's writing is going to be business persuasive. The other thing I would say is don't be afraid to measure success by conversions and try to figure that out.
Yeah, and I think as it relates to hiring writers, hiring is every startup's challenge, and this is something that kind of keeps me up at night. I only ever hire through referrals. So if you're listening to this thinking, well, where do I find a writer? Well, just ask your friends, other startup founders. Most writers are contracted by the company. Very, very few writers are actually full-time on staff. So you'll actually see, like, if you even go to HubSpot's blog or something, like, they will have the name of the person that wrote it. If you like that piece of writing, go on LinkedIn, Google that person. They are very, very likely a contracted writer, and you can hire them, whether it's per piece, per hour, per word, whatever it might be.
What else I'll say is that AI is here. And even you can use AI to get you a good distance of the way. And writers who are not using AI at all are going to frankly suffer. They need to learn how to incorporate that into their workflow. And like, we have also worked with a consultant named Tim Hansen from 530, who's also excellent at helping us learn how to improve our SEO strategy. He has a product called PenFriend. This is a little bit of a plug because it's quite remarkable, where he's baked in his years of SEO experience into how to write prompts for AI to generate content that is not fluff content. I can tell you, even with an excellent tool like that, you cannot rely 100% on it if you're going to write stuff that's really in the heart of your subject matter expertise. So, you can use it to get you like 75%, 80% of the way there, but then you really need to learn how to get someone from A to B, how to get them to sign up for your product after reading that article. We've sort of said this before in other episodes, but talking to your customers is the best way to do that. Interview them, find out, use their language, understand their before and after, and trust that there's other people like them out there.
Well, I think this is a good place to wrap up today. Just to summarize what we talked about. First, why marketing agencies suck. Very personal experiences. Some people are nodding their head and some people are hating on me, I'm sure. Why we needed to own our own SEO and the process that we went through to do that, and your learning curve and some of the surprises and challenges. What is your hot take from today?
It's sort of what I said before. You can do this. It's daunting, but it's learnable, but it takes dedicated time, especially at the beginning. So carve out 4 weeks, which might seem insane for a small founder or something like that, like of a small startup, but it will pay dividends and it's worth it. And you'll never succeed if you don't know how, at least on a fundamental level, how to do it yourself and how to measure success.
Yeah. And I think when you say that, do it yourself doesn't necessarily mean like you as a founder must do it yourself, but you must have a core team member that is willing to own this. Someone that you trust enough not to bounce to the next company, right? Someone that's really willing to grow with you and invested in you, the founders and the product, and really believe in wanting to help you execute this vision, like a really core team member. The next best thing is to, hire someone, right? But I do know that, as a bootstrap startup, it's not always an option to hire somebody senior, but you don't need somebody super senior, right? You just need someone that is willing to learn, is a good writer, has maybe some content background, not necessarily SEO content background, right? But just good at content. Yeah, I think my hot take is you need to own the things that are most important to your revenue. Like this was the biggest learning for me is you can't depend on third parties, right? Like we knew that SEO was going to drive leads, and it became so insanely clear to me after accepting marketing agencies were never going to deliver what we needed them to. Like it didn't even make sense anymore. Why we even gave them a chance? Like it was insane that we even tried. So if you enjoyed this podcast, I have a small favor to ask. The only way ProfitLed grows is by word of mouth. So if you can do us a favor, hit the subscribe or follow button wherever you're listening or watching this right now. It would mean the world to us, and it would help us continue to spend time making these episodes for you. Ping me on LinkedIn if there are particular topics that you want us to get into this season, and send me any feedback you might have on this podcast because I love hearing from you. My name again is Melissa Kwan, KWAN, and to get notified of new episodes, join our mailing list by going to ProfitLed.fm. I promise to only share things you'll actually care about. Thanks for listening. I know.
Bye.